Hello and welcome to the next episode of Thamanjimmy. Today we're going to talk about three main issues. Two are national related stories and one is a Florida story. We're going to start with the Florida story, and this happened, I believe, a few months ago. Okay, it happened about a month ago, and Rick Scott signed a bill that makes everyone responsible for reporting child sex abuse. Now, before, there were only certain people who were required by the state to notify police if there was child abuse. Under the new law, it basically imputes this duty to anyone. So it's anyone, regardless of whether you're a teacher or just a parent or you're a neighbor, that if you know or suspect any child sex abuse, that you have to report it. If you look at the bill is House Bill 1355, and it's interesting to note that the punishment ranges from a first-degree misdemeanor to a third-degree felony for not reporting the suspected child abuse. So again, this is a duty that the government has decided that we all have to comply with because of a social compact or because of the children. And so now we have to, if we suspect it just a little bit, even if it's just a little inclination. I know in schools currently, if they suspect it, whether it's serious or not, they have to notify the proper authorities. And now this is everyone. And again, the punishment is a first-degree misdemeanor. So you could go to jail and be fined if you don't report it. And my problem with it is mainly one, that it's a duty. Somehow the state believes that it can tell us what to do and to force us to report things that we may not want to report. One, we may not even know we may suspect it, but it might not be true, and we don't know what consequences are going to happen if we do tell someone. But we don't know if we don't tell someone, we don't know either. I mean, again, if you knew for sure that it happened, then yeah, morally you should probably tell someone. You should probably notify someone. But if you just suspect it, whatever that even means, you now have to tell someone. And that could hurt that child and the parents forever. Let's say that it didn't happen. And let's say you just suspected it because of something that happened. And now the dad or the mom are getting dragged into this, and so are the kid, and they have to deal with this. The other weird thing about this is that it creates a fine for schools of $1 million. Yeah, right here. Punishes with $1 million fine for each failure a Florida college system who know about it and don't report it. And my question with this is, I don't understand why you would fine a Florida college system $1 million. Like, I get what they're trying to do. This is a special interest issue here, where they're just trying to please a few people. But the state pays for most of these schools. They pay heavily. It's a mix between federal, state, and then private endowments from alumni, and then from tuition. And tuition doesn't get that much money. And so the state pays a great deal. They build the buildings, they pay for salaries, they pay the pension fund. It's a great deal of the state. So why would the state fine someone and it's money they're spending? It makes no sense. But the bottom line is that it's the government forcing us and forcing Florida citizens and residents to report something, and we're not trained in this. We have no knowledge of what we should be looking for, but now we have the duty to notify police officers. To me, this just seems like a way to punish the few and select people who don't report it, and it seems like it's going to be on a whim of just the politics that are involved. Oh, let's just get this guy because he's this color or because he lives in this neighborhood, and he's not going to happen in somewhere else. Or there's going to be some sheriff who who's really strong on rules, and then he's going to punish people, and then another sheriff who doesn't. And the bottom line is that this should be a moral responsibility of people, and the culture should want to notify someone if they have proof that it actually happened. Again, these links will be posted on the website. But my question, I guess, from this story is this a good idea? Is it the government's responsibility to force its people or its residents to tell on whether to notify police if they suspect sexual abuse of children? Another issue here, and this is on a national scene, there's a report by the Influential Institute of Medicine, and they talked about how there's obesity, and that is a problem, and it's a huge problem in America and around the world, but mostly in America. And they say that this study said that the best way to fight obesity is through schools. Now, I don't really want to get into a lecture about schools or a discussion of schools and the compulsory aspect of it and how it basically forces students to comply with ideas and customs that they may not want to and the consequences of that. But mainly in the fact that this report argued that the school has the responsibility to do something about it because nobody else is going to do it. And that's what they said in this study. And then they said that it recommended that students get at least 60 minutes of physical activity every day. Now, God knows how they would do that in a school setting when they're usually only there for about 6 to 8 hours or 6 hours, and they barely have enough time for school as it is, and now they want them to have a physical activity for an hour. But the main debate in this one is it's the same with the Florida law, is that should the government force schools, public schools, force them to fight obesity? And should that occur at a school? And how can that occur? I mean, what's the best way to teach kids to eat healthy? And is the school the best place for that? I don't see why a school necessarily even has to be involved in that aspect. Again, a school could try through various means, like having a project where maybe they have to make a menu or they have to keep track of what they eat. But again, I still don't see why the parents and why kids wouldn't care. Especially when you're getting older in middle school, when kids start to really care about their weight and how they look. You know, about 6th grade, 5th grade, that's when it hit me, and I think most kids, it's when it hits. And I don't think the school needs to tell you that you can't eat sugar food, or they have to take out sugar foods out of the school, or they can only put in fruit juices, which have a tremendous amount of sugar as well. So I don't know what exactly they're going to switch it with, unless it's going to be celery and carrots, and that's all you eat, and then maybe skim milk. But even then, it's the school forcing the student to do something that he doesn't want to do. And usually when that occurs, there's usually a backlash. Because usually if you don't want to do something voluntarily, you're going to fight it. And especially something like this, dealing with health and dealing with food. And you're falling asleep in class and you just want a Skittle or a Starburst to keep up. Or when teachers give out prizes in class, that's what they do a lot nowadays. And what are they going to do? Hand out celery sticks? But again, the discussion here should really be whether it works, whether a school can teach this. They seem to have failed on the drug teaching aspect. They seem to have failed. Smoking's actually increasing the use in schools, so they seem to have failed there. They've definitely failed in PE, and PE's been part of schools for over 100 years now, and yet kids are still obese, and that's what this report is reporting, and it just doesn't seem to make sense. So it seems like, again, this is another culture issue, and it really should be, it's not a societal problem, it is an individual problem. Right here it says, The Institute makes clear that this isn't just an individual, but a societal problem, because we have cheap, high-calorie foods. But again, this is an individual problem, because if you can't control yourself and tell yourself to eat moderately, whether it be good food or bad food, what's going to happen when you graduate high school? Who's going to tell you what to do then? Who's going to tell you 10, 20 years down the road? What about when you have kids? Who's going to force you to force your kids to eat healthy? It just doesn't seem to be the right way to handle this. Again, it should be the individual. There could be private institutions that maybe have a campaign where they notify people on exactly how to eat healthy. And then maybe parents can start doing their jobs again and teaching children how to moderately consume. Again, it's not eating no sugar, it's just eating immoderately. And that seems to be a problem that everyone has. And that's a whole nother discussion of the moderation aspect of anything, whether it be Facebook, internet, or food. The final story is this great one about giant dinosaurs could have warmed the planet. Basically, they caused a type of global warming back in the day. Now, I thought this one was interesting when I first read it. And then the next day I heard it on Rush. And he discussed it. And what he was saying, and I did not see this view at all until he said it, was that this author was reporting that he seems to be pro global warming. And he's saying that this is a problem and that we need to confront it. Now, I didn't really look at it that way at all. I thought this was a an anti-global warming, or at least a pro that the government can't do anything about it type aspect. It was important here that cows today make something like 50 to 100 million tons per year of carbon dioxide, and that the dinosaurs at that time made about 520 tons. And that caused the temperature to increase significantly. It says here 10 degrees Celsius. Now, again, cows today, just cows, produce 100 tons. So we're 1/5. But they're not counting, and cows produce quite a bit of food for us. There's meat and beef and everything that we eat. There's also chickens. And there's a lot of other animals that we consume on a daily basis. So if you added all these animals up around the world, there's got to be a couple hundred million tons of carbon dioxide created. And more importantly, and this was something I've never seen when discussing carbon dioxide. And there was a book, like I think in the 70s, about the population boom or bust or something like that. And this isn't what I'm about to argue. I'm just arguing that there's a correlation involved here. But here you have the CO2 level at about 1900. It started to rise. By 2000, we're way up here. So it's gone, big move up. But I want to look at this, and this is 1900. There were about 1.5 billion people on the planet. But in 2000, there's now 6.5 billion. And so my question is, why are we not discussing this? It's not necessarily pollution from power plants or from big businesses or big corporations causing this problem, or us being on the road and driving all around, which roads are built by government, the highway was built by government, and there's a whole different discussion. But my point in this discussion here is that we don't seem to look at the population. It's grown by 6 billion people from 1900. So not only are we consuming more food, so thus the cows, but we're also breathing out carbon dioxide. And everything we do creates and wastes and produces carbon dioxide, whether we drive in a car or whether we fart, whether we walk around and talk, whether we consume food, whether we work, where we work, what we do on a daily basis. And yet nobody talks about this. And what do? So we can blame big businesses. Let's say we capped all these pollution places, and we could create solar power panels, 50% of energy. Would that solve the problem? Because it seems to me that these dinosaurs created the 500 million tons of carbon dioxide. So why couldn't people do the same? Just us breathing and just us farting. Couldn't that create enough methane, enough carbon dioxide to cause this problem? Because again, we're not talking a billion people, we're talking 6 billion people. And yet people love to look at this, and I love this in Al Gore. It was a great little scene when he rides on that fancy little machine and he gets up there. But why didn't he show this? Why not? Because without this, that might not have been there. Had this been steady, and had the population maybe been at 2 billion, maybe this wouldn't be where it is. And so what are we going to do about it? We're going to have a cap and trade system. We're going to fine people. We're going to spend trillions of dollars on not using oil, which is just going to hurt poor people. So what do? And we can't kill everybody off. I mean, that can't happen. But we should look at policies that we have and see what we can do. But again, I just wanted to point out that I haven't seen this ever pointed out anywhere. So again, that's the discussion for today, those 3 topics. And the basic question, just to leave here, is whether the state can make cultural changes and whether they can force people to make those changes. It doesn't seem to work with drugs, with prohibition of alcohol in the 20s, or the prohibition of drugs today, specifically marijuana, or even alcohol being consumed by college-age students who are under 21. It doesn't seem to work. And this obesity and being told to report on people that you just suspect, and we don't even know what that means, and nobody's trained to, what am I looking out for? Am I looking for he's quiet, or he's scared and cries? That could be multiple things. But again, can the government and should the government have the responsibility to force its citizens to do something? It's question of the day. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.